Hello and welcome to Andy Explains It All, one of my favorite shows on this amazing podcast network of ours. I am your humble and somewhat know-it-all, but not really, host, Andy Asimakis. And with me is the, I guess, the unlearned Stephen Fontana. Stephen, welcome.
Hi. Hi, Andy. I am ready to learn again.
Mm,
I have learned so much about our previous two episodes, our previous two topics,
yes.
which of course were Stephen King and Metal Gear. Still lots of questions regarding Metal Gear, but you know what? That's to be
Right,
expected.
right. So in this show, I explain something to you. You are the resident dumbest idiot, and I am the smartest idiot. And I think today, more than our previous two episodes, you're going to actually learn something.
Well, I am certainly hoping. I am certainly hoping because my knowledge of today's topic is it is recent,
It is.
but it is fleeting.
It is. And I look forward to it. But for those who are new to Andy Explains It All, this is a show where I again explain something to Steven, which he knows very little about. It's
Mhm.
always great fun. Now, this show posts each and every other Friday for your
Mhm.
listening pleasure. We missed last week because we had some scheduling issues, but still, you'll get two back to back. So look at you
All right.
guys. If you like this show, and why wouldn't you? We have two more shows on this awesome network of ours. Our flagship series, we have the Dual Screens Games Cast and the Dual Screens Podcast, and those post each and every Monday and Thursday, respectively, on Spotify
Indeed.
and YouTube and Apple Podcasts and all those fun little podcast platforms. Now,
Mhm.
if you want to throw some hard-earned cash, you can do so if you'd like. Just like our Patreon producer, Colton the Apprentice Nestler,
Thank you, Colton.
the best guy ever, over at patreon.com/NDS podcast. For little as $1, you can save a starving child, or you can support this podcast.
It's true.
Pick your poison. And as always, any questions, comments, complaints, feedback, if I fuck up in these little things of ours, shoot us an email at feedback@ndspodcast.com. All right, Steven,
Let's get into this thing. I'm
let's
excited.
dive in. This is going to be, I got flashbacks of when I was in college trying to learn to be a professor or a teacher of some kind,
Hmm.
because I think the best way to describe this is lesson plan.
Interesting.
It's
Okay.
gonna be
Yeah. I
fun.
mean,
It's
is
You're
that
gonna learn some actual science shit today.
so? Did you approach this episode differently than you have approached the previous two?
What? Yes. In that my initial thought was the topic isn't very widespread as
Mm-hmm.
say a Metal Gear
Right.
or a Stephen King. But when I took a step back, there's more to this franchise than I remembered because I blocked one sequel out of my brain because it's
Okay.
dog shit.
Understood.
And there's something else which I think you and some listeners may not be aware of, which I had to kind of go back and do a refresher course on. But enough of the ball teasing. What is this week's topic? Please tell the audience.
This week, if you're watching visually
Mm.
on YouTube, you could see it below us, but it is Parasite Eve. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, a big time favorite of yours. You actually tasked me with trying it on our I believe it was our January retro game club.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to play a few moments of it, like I would say maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that stood out to me was the two biggest things were its atmosphere and its actual combat,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought were really cool. But that is essentially where my knowledge ends with
Alrighty.
Parasite Eve.
Okay.
I know the name. I've heard the name throughout my years of being a gamer and following gaming, but I do not have any intimate knowledge of this subject. And I know you're very passionate about it, so I
I
want
am.
you to explain it all.
So before we dive into what is Parasite Eve, there are a few key terms we must first identify and define. So I want you to dig back in your little high school brain and maybe I think you can, in one succinct sentence, tell me what a mitochondria is.
That is the powerhouse of the
All
cell.
right, that is the go-to phrase. It is, I think it's in every textbook growing up.
Yes, it is the energy source
Right.
of a cell.
Mm,
When a cell dies, it is because the mitochondria has deteriorated
correct.
and there is no more energy for that cell
Correct.
to continue
Correct.
to reproduce. Yes. So, wow, I am thoroughly shocked that I remembered
Right.
any of
But
that.
we're gonna go a little bit deeper because this whole franchise is based on a very specific attribute of the mitochondria.
Interesting.
So the mitochondria, yes, it does power the cell.
It also carries the DNA.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. Or at least one. Yes. Okay. Continue.
Mitochondria and cells share what we call an endosymbiotic relationship.
Mm.
So the mitochondria is has its own DNA, which is odd for something in our bodies because it's separate from our own. It does not, however, have enough DNA to survive outside of the cell, hence the symbiosis.
Yes.
So we need them, our cells need them, and they need the cell to survive.
Right.
So that's how that works.
Got it.
Another fun fact is that through the sexual reproduction, mitochondria are only passed down through our maternal parent, our mothers.
Mm.
So our sperm carry mitochondria because there's cells in our sperm, obviously. But when the sperm impregnates the egg, the male mitochondria dies or is destroyed by the egg during fertilization.
Right. It shoots out its hormone that says
Right.
every thing that's not supposed to be in here die.
Right. So all of
Yeah.
our mitochondria come from our mothers, essentially, is the key. Another
Interesting.
key fact in again, this game is based on it's all on science.
Sure.
So another key term, and that is mitochondrial Eve. So that refers to a woman that was born in Africa 2,000 years ago in the desert, to which we can trace back our mitochondrial heritage.
Mm.
It's an unbroken chain of mitochondria passed down over 2,000 years ago. That
Now, is this a real thing?
yes, that is the real thing. It's actual
Interesting.
science. Okay. Now, mitochondria Eve in the game series, there are several throughout the entire franchise. And their key goal is to eradicate and slaughter all of humanity to produce a superior organism that can control its own DNA and evolve at will.
Very devious.
Mm-hmm.
Very Final
Now,
Fantasy.
this entity, which mitochondria Eve is supposed to birth, is known as the ultimate being. This ultimate being essentially would have the ultimate survival skills. It would shorten millions of evolutionary years to a span of mere minutes.
Mm.
Okay, and we're getting in the way, us pesky humans.
As we do.
All right, so that's enough science and enough of a little slight video game backdrop with some key terms. So let's think for a second. Parasite Eve. I'm sure for you that means it's a video game that was made by Squaresoft in the year 1998. And you more than likely saw this on the back of the FF7 manual in your jewel case. There was an ad for
Yes.
it.
Hmm.
That's for most people were introduced to Parasite Eve, as I'm sure you were
That
as
is
well.
Yes, that is 100% a memory that is in my brain and not fabricated
Right.
or influenced by
Right.
your
What I
words.
just said. Just to drop a little fun fact, a little trivia bit for our listeners here.
Oh,
Parasite Eve was sort of a tech demo for Final Fantasy VII. The original setting for Cloud's adventure was based in New York City, but they dropped that, and that was later picked up for Parasite Eve, or became
hmm.
Parasite Eve.
Little inside
Now,
baseball. I like
another
it.
fun fact we should discuss. We don't get too political on these podcasts because we're not those kind of people. But there's a weird parallel. Is when this game came out, Parasite Eve, it was during the impeachment scandal of Bill Clinton. So it's a strange thing to talk about this game given the current political climate. It's a little bizarre to me.
Interesting. Yeah, there's
Here we are.
a little tie. Also,
Hmm.
um, one of the things that I think this also ties into, and this may have been on purpose,
Hmm.
is HIV and AIDS
Ah,
because 98 is kind of it wasn't the height of infection, but it was the height of
yeah.
awareness. I want to
Because
say
it was
like
the
the mid
80s,
to
that
late
was when the
90s.
severe outbreaks were.
Right. And then somewhere between 94 and 2000, a lot of awareness and medical advancements
Mhm.
came into play. So, but people were still terrified. Like, I think Rent came out in 96 or
Right, yeah.
97.
Mhm.
Like, people were still terrified of the super human killer, like
Right.
the thing that's going to wipe us out
And
because we don't know anything
right.
about it.
And I don't know if you recall what the game's tagline is. They do show it briefly at the end of the gorgeous CG intro for the PS1 game,
Hmm.
and that's the worst enemy or the worst foe is within the self, which is kind of poetic if you think about it.
And can apply to almost
Yeah, to
any
many things.
work of
Mhm.
art.
All right,
Okay.
so that's a good jumping off point. So for you and like most people, they know this as a video game franchise that began first in the late 90s. But to understand this franchise, we have to go back, further
We're
back,
going in the
three
Wayback Machine.
years prior, because Parasite Eve, the PS1 game, is actually a sequel to a novel written by Hideaki Senna called Parasite Eve. Okay?
Hmm.
Now that I think most people may know, but you don't know. So you just
I
learned that.
certainly didn't
So
know
you
that.
just
Did you
learned that.
read that?
I did. I did.
It's been translated.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was actually made into a movie as well. Actually a pretty goddamn good movie if I say so myself.
Oh.
So Senna had a background in pharmacology, and his job was essentially to test mitochondria with various drugs to see if they could convert fatty, I believe it was acids, into energy. And he was watching on the telly one day a documentary about mitochondria, and he was thinking about this idea of mitochondria not holding their end of the bargain up with our cells and sort of revolting and ending that relationship with our cells.
An interesting take on like an AI
Right.
story, like an AI becoming
Right.
aware
So
and
it's
stuff.
like they've had enough because essentially, when you consider their own DNA, their own genus in our body, they're kind of these foreign entities. They are like parasites within
Right.
us, which is kind of creepy when you think about it. So the novel supposes that all of our mitochondria, which came from the female line thousands of years ago, have formed this sort of displaced consciousness, a life form called Eve. So every
Hmm.
person's mitochondria are all part of the same consciousness. And
Okay.
it's been waiting for just the right time in history to break free and evolve and become free of humanity, more or less.
When you were doing your research,
Mm-hmm.
did you come across any weird conspiracy theories as to why we are all tied back to this one woman?
I didn't dive that deep.
Because
I didn't want the whole 2 hour podcast like the last
I
time.
think I think I have heard a theory, an ancient alien theory
Oh.
that that 2000 or so years ago, or probably further back, we were visited by a superior alien race that injected us into something that would speed evolution
Mm.
and make us smarter, more survivable, and essentially
Right.
advance us as a species. Now, I feel like I mean, there are gaps in our evolution scientifically. Like people, like scientists have been working for years to find the missing link between us as primates to now, and they think they keep finding one, but there's still, I think they said 400,000 years or something like that. We there's a $400,000 400,000 year leap, I think,
Mm-hmm.
between what they have found of our genome, like where they could trace back, and what we are now. That there's something missing in between.
Mm.
So I'm wondering if there's a theory out there that does think that we were
Well, I'm pretty sure
visited.
that these theorists likely read a bit of Senna's work and on mitochondria because you can kind of fit that into that box if you want, if you really wanted to.
Also, also, side question:
Hmm.
where among the cell are the midichlorians?
See, that's a very complex question.
Interesting.
We have
Okay,
to get George Lucas on the podcast to answer that one.
got it.
Maybe
Got
next
it.
time.
Because I'm
Maybe next time.
pretty sure he was like, "What does everybody have? Mitochondria, mitochlorian."
Florians. Yep, that's
And then
that's I'm gonna
and
run with that one.
that's essentially how he got to that point. Okay, all right,
And
let's move
he
on.
wants back in, right? Into Star Wars. That's like his thing now. He's like vying to get
Mm,
back in the franchise. Like, I'll fix it. All right, so the time has come. The Eve in us all has found the perfect host with which to carry out her plan, as it were, to break free and to also give birth to this ultimate being, apparently.
Is this perfect being named Adam?
It's not.
Okay, because that would have been really on the nose.
The perfect host is a woman named Kiyomi.
Kill me.
Kiyomi. And her husband, Dr. Toshiaki, just so happens to do research into mitochondria. Riddle me that.
Weird.
So, what a great
It's all a
coincidence.
strand.
Yeah.
It's a strand game.
Yes, it's the first Strand movie, the first Strand novel. So naturally, when the Eve within Kiyomi knows that this is the perfect host for me, her plan is sort of odd. So follow me. So it is,
How can you first explain to me how we are being introduced to the Eve? Like, how do we communicate as the viewer? How does it communicate to us? Like, is
well,
it a voice that we
no,
hear? Is it
it's sort of through the actions of Kiyomi. It doesn't
okay?
take too long for Eve to manifest, and we'll get to that.
Is it kind of like a symbiote?
It's super bizarre. Don't ask any
Okay.
questions yet. We'll get there.
Okay. All right.
So it
Continue.
is the eve, as it were, of her first year anniversary with her husband, Toshiaki. And she's like, "Hey, I have these huge plans. I want to go out, make it special." And he's like, "Babe, there's like liver cells I'm working on. The rats are responding to the mitochondria because his work is about curing disease. That if cancer is a damaged cell, if we
Hmm.
can inject healthy mitochondria, they can reprogram the cell to make it healthy once again. That's his little shtick.
Got it. Right.
So he's like, "Babe, the rats are doing better. Mitochondria, you can't make it, babe." So he goes to work.
Selfish.
He goes to work.
Trying to
It
save the
is, it
world.
is Japan after all. They're all workaholics over there. So she drives home, and while she's driving home, Eve sort of takes control of her body and causes this perfect host to crash her car.
Yes, destroy the perfect host. That's a
Yes.
great plan.
Right. So she she collides with a truck which is carrying steel beams, and one steel beam nearly goes through her head. So Toshiaki's at work with his rats, playing with them goddamn rats, and he gets a memo. Bro, your wife is like almost dead. She's missing a face, more or less. So he goes to the hospital, and she's essentially brain dead at that point. But fortunately for Eve, sorry for Kiyomi, really, she's an organ donor, which
Oh,
she filled out the donor card 6 months prior. With
Eve did it.
yeah, well, yes, you beat me to it. Eve made her do it.
Interesting.
So she is on her deathbed. She's officially brain dead, and now her organs will be used to go into a young girl named Mariko, who is going into the same hospital every day for dialysis. So her kidney goes into Mariko. So don't forget that. So for some reason, during this whole exchange of giving her the kidney to young Mariko, Toshiaki decides to, I don't know, start growing some of Kiyomi's liver cells in his lab,
Why not?
which he thinks are
When in
to
Rome.
further experiments, but it's just Eve manipulating him. And he grows enough liver cells to give Eve an independent body.
Oh, okay. So he basically is
He makes her a
cloning a
body
human.
of liver cells.
So it doesn't look like a person. It's just a
Oh no, it
fleshy
becomes a person. It
through
legit,
through Eve's
yes.
evolution, but not through.
Right. So the mitochondria in all these liver
Okay,
cells form like an actual human being. It's a blob, but it
got it.
becomes an actual female,
Got it.
which at one point it assumes the shape of his lab assistant, Asakura, which now let's go back to the main thesis here. The point
Right.
of Eve is to have a child that's going to be the ultimate being. What does a
Okay.
what does a woman need to have a baby?
A womb,
She's got a womb, but what else?
ovaries,
She's got that. What else?
a penis,
Well, not that, but what does the penis have that she doesn't have?
balls,
What's in the balls?
semen.
Yeah, she needs that. She needs that boiling hot
We got
scum.
there.
Is what she
We
needs.
got there. Okay.
She needs that
So
man
she's
milk.
trying to seduce him now as
Right.
his lab assistant.
Right.
Got it.
Which she
Okay.
does, and at one point takes his dead wife's appearance, which is very fucked up.
This is very what's the name of that movie? Basic Instinct.
Right. She essentially does rape him to get his
Yeah,
sperm.
sure.
Now, one thing you should know, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree to this, given that you played the first hour or so of Parasite Eve, is that Eve herself has pyrokinetic abilities. She can set people on fire by, I guess,
Why?
heating up the mitochondria and the cells to the point of spontaneous combustion.
Okay.
There's also there's
Telekinetically, I guess they're linked.
she
Yeah, I
has
guess you
some
did say
yeah
that.
she has
All
some
right.
weird mind control shit as well, which it's not really fully explained, but it's kind of there. And
This is yeah. She's a weird villain.
right, and she can levitate also.
A little OP
So Eve now has her sperm, and she
in
takes
her, or did she
in
like
her.
capture
What's in
like
her?
okay,
It's in her, and she uses the sperm to fertilize an egg, which she then implants into young Mariko.
where did she get the egg from?
Oh, she got one. She got
She's
one. She got
she's
one.
found
She
one.
make it.
She's just like, here's an
Yeah,
egg.
she make it.
She made the egg.
So she
Okay.
implants the egg into Mariko's womb,
Okay.
and she becomes almost instantly visibly pregnant, like
Right.
ready to pop
Okay.
in any moment, which she does. And she gives birth to the ultimate being. So this glob of energy is causing total havoc. But Eve didn't account for one thing, and that is the sperm that was Toshiyaki's was carrying the male mitochondria,
Right, as it does.
right, which was also trying to fight for its survival. So,
Okay.
in order to protect itself from being essentially destroyed, it was fighting with the female mitochondria within the ultimate being. So much so
Okay.
that the ultimate being was shifting genders back and forth.
Okay.
Hmm. So essentially, this experiment failed for Eve. Didn't go so great. She was like, "Fuck, the men,
I feel like if there was anything Eve
the
would have
men
thought
ruined it
through,
again."
yeah, the big old Pangus.
Hmm.
This reminds me a little bit, actually, kind of a lot of bit,
Mm.
of the story of Goku in Dragon Ball Z
Mm.
because he and we're not doing a Steve explains it all here, so I'm not going to go too deep, but
Right.
he was a warrior race from a warrior planet. All they do, what they are born to do, is to fight.
Mm.
That's all they do.
Mm.
And with every loss,
It's like the
they get
Spartans.
yes, and but with every loss, his power it grows
Right.
exponentially as long as he doesn't die.
Mm.
Or if he's brought back to life after he dies, obviously it continues to grow. But
Right.
he was sent to Earth as a baby to essentially enslave the human race and rule that planet.
Hmm.
The problem was where the person who found him um, treated him with so much love that eventually an accident happens. Now, this wasn't because of the love, but an accident happens where Goku hits his head. He falls from like a cliff, bangs his head, loses memory of where he came from. And because he was treated with so much love from these Earthlings, he then became a warrior defender of Earth.
He
So,
became Raiden, Thunder God,
as
protector of Earthrealm.
kind of yes, he's the protector of Earth. So, but when he gets so powerful that he turns into what's later known as a Super Saiyan,
Yes, I am
he
quite
starts to
familiar with this story.
lose he starts to lose a little bit of his humanity. And in one point he looks at Gohan when he's Super Saiyan and he says, "Gohan, go take Piccolo, get out of here. Go now before I lose whatever sense of reason I have
It
left."
sounds a lot like Jean Grey and the Phoenix Force. When
Yes,
they-
very similar.
yeah.
But
Another
the
parasite.
reason why it reminds me of Parasite Eve is because the perfect being, aka Goku,
Mhm.
was clearly programmed to do one thing,
Right.
but because of humanity,
It learned to
he
love. Love.
he learned to instead protect. So it's
Exactly.
interesting.
He attack, he
Continue.
protect,
He
he
protect.
protect.
He attack. He protect.
So the ultimate being is now super confused. It's like, I'm a boy, I'm a girl, much like today's millennials. And Toshiaki is like, dude, I know you want to live, but this is kind of over now. So Toshiaki, in an effort to save lives, merges with this boy girl ultimate being to sort of, it's like basically throwing himself on a grenade to contain that burst of energy that would kill all the surrounding people.
Mm.
And that's how the story ends in Parasite Eve. Um, all the villains die. Eve is dead. The baby's dead. Toshiyaki's dead. But Mariko survives. And her
Hmm.
story continues in Squaresoft's Parasite Eve.
Who wrote the game?
The game was a collaboration between Squaresoft and Parasite Eve's publisher. It was
Interesting.
actually some more fun facts. It was the first M-rated game for Squaresoft,
Uh huh.
and it was the first game that there was a joint between the Japanese and US teams to create it.
That's probably why the gameplay I click with the gameplay because
Right,
it's not very Japanese.
exactly. And also, the author, Senna, had no idea this was happening.
Another interesting little tidbit. So
He
he
didn't
got
mind. He
bamboozled.
was like, okay, cool. You just, yeah, because I mean, the publisher owned the rights of the IP, so they could, you know,
Do whatever they
what they
want.
want. Yeah.
But I would assume you would want the creator in on the creative process.
Right.
That seems weird.
Right. But fortunately for Senna and us gamers, we got one of, if not the best, science fiction body horror stories ever told in a video game.
Mm.
It is sheer perfection. And it all begins Rockefeller Center, Carnegie Hall, Christmas Eve.
Eve. There it is
Yeah,
again.
it's like it's a little bit on the nose, but it's whatever. That's why another fun fact. You'll always catch this game on streams on Christmas Eve. It's a little uptick around that time of year for obvious reasons. And the
Mm.
game is set across 6 days. So you'll have streamers playing it like one day at a time until New Year, essentially, with the game when the game ends, which is it's kind of sweet when you think about it.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool.
So Mariko, which still has Eve's, well, Kiyomi's kidney in her, which has the Eve kidney inside of her, grows up and has two little girls, Maya, and I guess they couldn't think of a better name, so they called the second one Aya. Two twin girls, Maya and Aya Brea. Um, Fortunately for Mariko and Maya, they met an end. Car accident.
Oh,
Eve
the
is big
car
on
event.
car accidents, apparently. And it's
Yeah.
a callback to the novel or the movie, as it were. So young Aya lost her sister and her mom at a very young age. But she grew up and became a cop for the NYPD.
Nice.
So she's a rookie at this time. And we are treated to now when we think about, again, not to get too political here, there's been buzz lately about female game protagonists and having them be more prominent in video games. Let's
Sure.
not have, the constant white male lead.
Hmm.
I feel like people don't go back far enough because Aya is, she was like a sex icon when this game came out. I'm not sure if you caught any marketing, but it was all about the sex appeal with her. And even
Sure.
me as a gay man, I was obsessed with her look, with her jacket, with her tits coming out. It was amazing.
Was that? But I mean, I guess that would be the problem that people would have is that there were no female leads that it wasn't about sex.
Right, but
Like Lara Croft was like the
I mean, she was all tits, but Aya was, you know,
Cupido.
she was a no frills cop, and she was a rookie, and she was the hero. And we see that in the game's first moments. So she is coming out of a
Hmm.
car with her, I think it's a blind date, and she has like her Donna Karen, her little black dress on. She's got her little black dress on, and she's ready to rock. But
Ready to do it.
of course, Aya, she hates the opera, hates it. But yet there she is, going on a blind date, just trying to have some fun.
Going to the opera.
Right. As any young girl would do. A night off, I go to the opera. Little did she know that there was chaos awaiting.
Gasp.
During the opera, the lead actress, Melissa Pierce, is making her debut on stage. She was a long understudy of the original lead actress who suddenly died in an apartment fire.
Fire.
Right? Just
Uh oh.
putting it out there. You connect the dots.
Uh-oh.
So Melissa is like, all right, this is my big chance. I can like go on stage and my career starts now, more or less. Now, Melissa had a recent, well, not too recent, but a while back, had a kidney transplant.
Yeah, oh boy.
And she was taking immunosuppressant drugs to help with the compatibility with the kidney.
Right. Right.
But little did she know, she was weakening her body to make it all the more easier for the Eve lying in that kidney.
Because it was the mom's kidney.
It was Maya's kidney.
Maya's kidney. Yeah.
I mean,
The plot
I mean,
thickens.
Mariko had already one bad kidney, and she
Right.
got the other one, but Maya's kidney was in Melissa. So on the stage,
What's with all the names that start with M?
right? Maya.
It's weird.
I don't get the Maya Aya thing. You can pick a different name for the sister. It's like Arlene's name is Aya. What's her sister's name? I don't know. Maya. Well, we'll go with that.
Yeah,
You can
it's
call her
weird.
Sally or Rebecca.
Literally anything
Right.
would have
Anything but
sufficed.
Maya.
You could call her Beth.
Bethel. Okay, so while she's on stage, she's performing this beautiful opera scene. And again, this was also dubbed the cinematic RPG in all the
Mm-hmm.
marketing
Mm-hmm.
because it had
Mm-hmm.
so many cutscenes. It's rife with them. It's like every other thing is like bam, CG, bam, CG. And for us, that was huge back in the day. And they were just
Yeah,
so
there was
gorgeous.
no there was nothing close. I mean,
Yeah,
before Final Fantasy is really
right.
yeah.
But it was just incredible. So she's singing, and then she sees Aya in the audience, and they make eye contact. Now, why would Melissa, who essentially now Eve is taking over her body, why would she sense something with Aya? Yes, she's Maya's sister, with which her kidney comes from,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the same exact mitochondria.
Right.
Well, fortunately for Maya and for Melissa and Eve, Aya at one point underwent a cornea transplant, and that came from her dead sister Maya. So we have Eve's mitochondria are now in Melissa and partially in Aya through the cornea, and a connection is made. At that moment, when their eyes
Okay.
lock in a passionate glare, everyone in the audience bursts into flames. And I'm
Oh,
talking
Carnegie Hall.
everyone. The people on stage, the audience, it's just utter havoc. And you have this beautiful shot of Melissa, who again is not at this point now Eve. She's like has her arms swaying in the air, and you see the curtains behind her just engulfed in flame. And you hear the screams of the audience behind her. It's again perfection. Perfection. So Aya, with her date, who is at this point scared shitless,
Not on fire?
not on fire, but scared
Okay.
shitless. He's like, oh shit, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Now, this goes back to my earlier statement about her being a badass cop chick, not just all sex. Pulls out her gun, and she's like, get the fuck down. And she shoves him to the ground. Shoves him. She's like, listen, I don't
Shows
know
him
what
who's
the fuck's
boss.
going on, but I'm going up there. So Aya runs to the stage with her weird kind of like molasses footsteps. I'm not sure if you realize that. She walks kind of slow. It's the one main flaw in this game. She it's like she takes 5 steps but only moves like 3. Her
Yeah,
walk cycle seems like they're trying to always catch up with themselves. It's like a tuk,
her
tuk, tuk,
feet
tuk, 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 tuk,
go forward,
but
but
she
then
doesn't move
before
as
they
much.
land,
Right.
yeah, before the feet land, they come back
It's like she's on a
a little
treadmill,
bit.
but she's
Right.
making some traction, but not as much because she's on a goddamn
It's
treadmill.
very slippery.
Right. So essentially, what happens at this point, Melissa becomes Genova from Final Fantasy.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
Mutates.
That's yeah.
She
Yeah.
mutates. And you fight her. And she's like, Aya, listen to your genes, your mitochondria, your true power is in you. And then Aya has a weird burning sensation, but she doesn't actually burn. She's
Mm.
controlling the mitochondrial power within her.
She's feeling the burn,
Right. She
but she's
feels the
not on
burn.
fire. Right.
Yes.
Hashtag feel the burn.
So
2020.
she kind of gets the powers of Eve, but isn't succumb to it. Like she has her own
Uh huh.
free will,
Mm-hmm.
which becomes the game's magic system. It's called
Right.
Parasite
Yeah.
Energy. You can cast
Yeah.
heal, energy shot, there's haste, there's slow, all that shit.
All the
All
tropes.
that shit. So Eve goes on a rampage and Manhattan is evacuated at this point. Could you imagine happening today? Like a full blown evacuation of Manhattan? It's bonkers.
No, because the MTA can't even get me home on
Yeah,
time, so I
that's yeah.
can't
You would
imagine.
die in the subway tunnel.
Yeah.
It'd be
Sorry, because of a switch problem, 3.5 million people are now dead
right. You'd be
because of a switch
a
problem at
pile of embers by the time you knew that there
Broadway
was
Lafayette.
that there was. How about that G line though?
Good
That's a great
lord.
ass line. So Aya has one of the best sidekicks ever, Daniel, who is this really awesome black cop, and who is also raising his son Ben by himself.
Mm.
And another key character is there is a Asian scientist as well. So we have this again, not to get political, but
It's a
we
nice
have
diverse cast.
very diverse.
Yeah.
Represents a huge swath of people. We have
Sure.
a strong female lead, a strong supporting black male character, and a like a tertiary Asian stereotype, but still he's smart. He's good. And they're all key players in this whole saga.
Sure.
So Kunihiko Maeda, who's the Asian scientist guy, um, was at one point studying Eve cells back in the day because they were around. Them liver cells. Apparently, they got around a lot after the initial incident years ago with the boy girl ultimate being. And
Right.
so he has a theory, and that's called it's based on the selfish gene theory that our genes are wired for survival. That's why we have kids for no other reason, to maintain our bloodline and to survive as a species. That's how it works.
Sure. 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 Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's all nice to be like, yeah, I'm going to have a baby someday, but deep down through evolution, that's the key reason to have a child is to essentially propagate the species. And these mitochondria are in this sort of weird race, an evolutionary race for survival with humanity. So it's trying to weed us out because we're the threat, more or less. So, aside from our Asian scientist and our awesome black cop and our no frills female protagonist, there is one more man in this drama, Dr. Clamp, who is sort of an Eve a file, to put it lightly.
Okay, so he's like the guy that knows it
Right.
all.
And
He's going evil. There's no chance in hell he's not
he's
getting
been
manipulated into or
studying
helping.
Eve and her cells for quite some time.
Yeah,
And
he's
he's
getting fucked
like
with.
he's the patsy that's gonna help Eve in her master
Oh
plan.
yeah, yeah. That's what I figured was happening.
So the first time around, The issue was when the ultimate being was born, the male mitochondria were trying to fight for survival in the new body with the female mitochondria.
So Eve needs to figure out a way to reproduce with another female.
Okay, that's perverted.
I'm just
I'm telling
saying,
your wife.
if the male is the problem, you got to bump uglies.
So to solve this little issue, Dr. Clamp uses his own sperm and
Mm-hmm.
he removes the male mitochondria from it. So when Eve gives birth, there'll be no problems.
Mm.
Now, along the way, we have some pretty awesome boss fights, a giant
Sure.
alligator. Oh, and in any half decent body horror slash Carpenter the Thing kind of movie, we have a dog that becomes an abomination of the Lord. It becomes Cerberus, three heads.
Nice.
Its head splits in three parts, and three new heads form. There's a
Awesome.
giant scorpion, there's a giant spider, all sorts of fun shit. Oh, and at one point, Eve makes a giant orange blob. Nope, that's not Donald Trump. It's a giant orange blob of,
Like from the blob.
of people's bodies, of their cells, to sort of use as fuel to
It's very
birth,
Stranger Things.
yes, to birth this ultimate being. So she essentially, as the game goes on, she evolves more Eve, gets more powerful, and gets very, very pregnant to give birth to this ultimate being. So she's preggers, and Eve's like, it's now like around day 6, the end of this whole saga. And Eve has her baby, and she dies in a puddle of goo, smirking at Aya, like, bitch, I won. This is a perfect being. Ain't got no male mitochondria, ain't gonna die. You're all fucked at this point. Now, this thing is very bizarre looking. It is a imagine a baby with wings and a giant brain, and with like
Okay.
razor sharp teeth.
Okay.
That is the ultimate
Okay.
being that she gives birth to. With which its first cries destroys a fleet of aircraft carriers.
Okay. All right. So this thing is got some sort of powers here.
Quite powerful. So Eve is like, okay, if anyone gets near this thing, they'll burst into flames because it's out of control. So she's like, listen, guys, I got this. Leave me to it. Daniel and Maida, like Maida was trying to give her something before leaving. She's like, I got something to give you. Throughout the whole game, he gives you weird charms, like little tokens.
Mm.
And Daniel's like, stop with that voodoo shit. We're leaving. He's like, no, 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 no. It's not voodoo. It's not voodoo. He's like, no, no, no. We don't have time for this. We're bolting. So they both leave on a helicopter to get out of range of the ultimate being. So Aya's like, listen, bro, I know you were just born, but it's time for a late term abortion.
Oh boy. It's very late term.
Yeah. So she starts shooting it, as one would do when you see a giant floating baby with a giant brain. And after a few rounds, it evolves. Because, it's okay, I got to survive now. So I'm going to adapt to what's going on. I'm going to evolve. So it changes its form to a more adolescent, childlike appearance. Now, I'm going to add here this boss fight is made even better by the exquisite soundtrack. The Ultimate Being track on the Parasite Eve score is what it's called. It actually
Mm.
evolves with the boss fight itself.
Sure.
So it has like a subtle intro, then a drum kicks in, then another bass line kicks in, then like keyboards come into play. So it kind of goes as the boss changes forms and it evolves. It's just, again, can't say it enough, perfection. So you shoot some more rounds at it, it evolves again to a more adult form, kind of like angelic. It's got more full fleshed out wings now. It looks like the idea of a male, but without a personality.
Okay.
It's like just a blank human like figure with wings and a giant ball sack.
It's like something on the cover of like a
Right,
Marilyn Manson CD.
right.
Got it.
So it feels like it's the last form because there's like a dramatic camera swoop when this thing changes its face, and it's like, great, this is it. And then, by the way, this whole exchange, this was kind of like the Mike Tyson punch out fight of a teenage gamer because my sorry, Maya Aya is she's sort of squishy. Like
Sure.
there's no 9999 health bar like in Final Fantasy. It's like a very small health pool for Aya Brea. So if you don't watch your health or heal often, you could die almost immediately.
Hmm.
So you shoot this thing and you shoot this thing, and it evolves again
Oh boy.
to something that's not quite human, like a green.
Michael Moore.
No, you're right. To like this green, something out of shape out of water situation. It looks like a giant green slug with multiple appendages.
Okay.
And you're like, why won't you die? It just keeps evolving.
Sure.
So at this point, you're shooting it, and you do about one damage. It'd be one health point damage on this thing. And you're like, shit, this is like fucked right now. I can't damage this asshole. We cut to our boys, Daniel and Maida, back in the helicopter. And Maida's like, shit, she's like having a hard time down there. I wish I gave her that thing I wanted to. And Daniel's like, what? I thought it was more voodoo shit. And he's like, oh no, it's bullets with her cells in them. And Daniel's like, what? Why'd you say so, bitch? So Daniel, just for a recap, single father of a young boy named Ben. He's like Ben's world, and Ben is his world. Daniel supposes that if we don't stop this thing, we're all doomed. We're all going to die. So Daniel does. And I think this cutscene is the single greatest act of heroism and badassery ever in
Oh.
a video
Oh,
game.
that's a mighty big statement, Andy.
I think it's on the same level as Snake diving into chase Metal Gear Ray
Hmm.
in Metal Gear Solid 2. It's that epic. So Daniel throws himself from the helicopter. As he's descending towards Earth, hurtling towards the aircraft
At, at,
carrier
at great
at great
speed.
speed, his body, of course, bursts into flames. And we
Sure.
get a nice close up of his eyes widening as he catches on fire. It's very, very spooky, very scary. Somehow manages to throw the ammo clip at Aya. She catches it and he goes right into the water. So she's like, okay, he might be a dead now, but I got these fancy new bullets. Let's kick some ass and take some names. So bullets go in, and then it's like 2,000 damage, 4,000 damage. It's like two, maybe four hits, and the boss is dead.
Nice.
Dead. So the cells literally rip it apart. Its little wing arms get all fucking bubbly and they tear off. It squirms and gyrates. Its face melts. But after all that, this thing that's programmed to evolve and to survive chases Aya into the hull of the aircraft carrier. So it's chasing you. And it's also, if it gets you, it's a one hit kill, by the way.
Mm.
There's no fight. It's if it catches you on the little chase sequence, you're dead. And you're doing all that again. There's no in between saves. Back to square one from the first form. So she decides to turn the juice up so the tanker explodes. She jumps off the tanker.
All tankers have the
Right,
turn the
of
juice up
course, the
button.
juice up button, yes. Uh, it goes big bang boom. Ultimate being is dead. And it all kind of wraps with a happy ending. Back at the opera house. Daniel made it. He didn't die. He's alive and well. And as Aya sits in the audience, her mitochondria signals everyone's in the crowd and their eyes glow as to say, it's still in her, like it or not,
Hmm.
like it or not. Now, before we move on to Parasite Eve 2,
Mm-hmm.
there is one thing we should mention about Parasite Eve, and that
Yes.
is it has a sort of secret, true last boss, and that is in a new game plus.
Okay.
If you beat the game and you play again, you unlock the Chrysler building. And if you climb the Chrysler building, I believe it's 54, 55 flights of it's like waves of the game's hardest enemies. You'll be met with what's known as True Bred Eve.
Oh.
This was a contingency that Eve and her boy Clamp concocted. That if Eve were to fail in birthing the ultimate being, and if that were to fail and die, at least the true bred would remain. So a sort of cocoon is formed as a hub for the true bred of Eve. And it appears in the form of Aya's sister Maya.
Mm.
So you get to meet your sister. And it's very heartbreaking,
Murder her.
but you do murder her.
Yeah, you got to do it.
But the Maya part of True Bred Eve, much like your Goku scenario earlier,
Mm-hmm.
sort of fights back and is like, no, like, we can't do this. So Aya kills True Bred Eve, and then all of the mitochondria Eve within Aya sort of die as well, ending the Eve like bloodline. Now, part two sort of overwrites this, so it's kind of like a non-canon situation. But again, it's a fun little thing, and of course, it's a new game. For an RPG to have a whole other section and a true last boss was kind of unheard of back in the day for
That's
PS,
pretty cool.
right? Because I learned about that years later. I was like, shit, okay, that's replayability right there. So, Parasite Eve 2. And I think at this point in the podcast, we're going to see a dwindling enthusiasm from me.
Yes, we are at 1 hour. So,
And I timed this because part two and part three, one is the high point of the entire franchise.
it's, all right.
Part two doesn't quite live up. And part three, I may have repressed. It's that bad.
So, what are the basic plot points? What
We're gonna
happens in
go. We're
Parasite Eve
gonna go
2?
through this. The key bullet points.
Okay.
Okay. So Aya, some years after Parasite Eve, what was dubbed the Manhattan Incident, has now moved her butt from beautiful New York City to fucking Los Angeles,
Of course.
where she has joined the team to take out NMCs or neo mitochondrial creatures, as it were.
Like a task force.
Yes, which has a name.
Oh.
It's called the Mitochondrial and Suppression, known as
Wait,
MIST.
say that again. You broke up a
The
little bit.
Mitochondrial Investigation and Suppression Team,
Okay.
known
All
as
right.
MIST.
Ghostbusters, essentially.
Right.
Got it.
Now,
But for mitochondrial activity.
there's two key figures in this whole game, and the
Okay.
first of which is Kyle Madigan. Now, let's drop some fun facts about Parasite Eve 2. Parasite Eve 2 was the first game to introduce the sexy Aya shower scene. So we're really banking on that sex appeal in part 2.
Sure.
That's actually it's really hot.
Know your
It's really
audience, I
hot, by the
guess.
way. I'm not gonna lie. Um, this game was strongly influenced by Resident Evil 2 because one of its
Okay.
developers worked on Resident Evil 2. So we do away with that whole like awesome targeting system from Parasite Eve. Now the aiming and the shooting feels like Resident Evil. It's just point and shoot.
Why would they do that?
The RPG parts are reduced to magic casting. So your parasite powers are still there, but that's where the timed or the active time bar goes into play. But you
Mm-hmm.
can shoot with your guns and there's ammo.
Willy nilly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So Kyle Madigan, he's a key figure because the gameplay design was so different from Parasite Eve. This was first a spin-off game with Kyle as lead character. So that made sense. It's more of an action game. It doesn't star Aya. There's a new guy. He's in LA. That change makes sense gameplay wise. But we're not about to drop this game's biggest selling point, and that's Aya Brea. So she comes back in. And the new approach, this more action oriented gameplay, is here to stay. But unfortunately, that gameplay would be its downfall. It is clunky as fuck.
And this was also on PS1?
Also on PS1.
Okay.
So, to boil this story down in its most simplest terms, and why we have taken this incredible John Carpenter esque horror story about mitochondria that are in our bodies revolting and evolution and gross deformities and just it's all out gore fest in the first game becomes reduced to the most asinine, the most mundane, predictable sequel, and that is the government did it. They got the cells, they did their own program, their own shit. Yeah, we're doing clones now to make bioweapons.
Yeah, that was all the rage back then.
Right. And it's kind of sad to see this once like really great story that really pushed hard science to make its point is now a run of the mill like cash in. Like, well, the government got involved. We got Aya cells. We're gonna clone Aya. When that happens, by the way. So Aya
Of course, yeah.
is cloned, and that clone is named Eve. Because why not?
Has nobody learned anything in the government? Okay, so government get the main crux is government gets involved. They want to make some sort of bioweapon
Right.
because they saw how powerful the thing was that it
Yes.
nearly leveled Manhattan.
Right.
Very. I mean, that's very cliche. It's like
Right.
Shredder creating Bebop and Rocksteady. Same reason. He saw the turtles needed something powerful.
Right.
He made them
Right.
with the same technology. All right, I
So
get it.
Aya goes through this whole journey and she comes across this agency called the Shelter, and they're like the shadow group that's doing the whole thing behind the scenes. And she comes across her clone or her little sister, as she puts it,
Sure.
Eve Brea, in this little pod. And she's like, fuck, we gotta get out of here. We gotta leave. Like, this is just dumb at this point. This is the end, by the way. We're just gonna cut to the chase at this point because there's not really much surprise and intrigue in this game.
Right.
It's very by the numbers as a sequel,
Okay.
and it doesn't try to have great storytelling. It's just a simple
It
site.
seems like it wasn't really trying to do anything except for sell copies.
Right. Well, if that's your premise, it's just the government or some shadow group, the Patriots. so, um, so Aya and Kyle, and by the way, Aya and Kyle are getting very chummy because you gotta have a love interest now
Yes.
because we have this independent, awesome woman, but she needs a man in her life, and that's gonna play even more in the third game, which we'll get to in a minute. So Aya tries to rescue Eve, who was made from her own DNA. Her identical, it's her twin clone, essentially. Eve falls in this orange goop, and then our old friend, Parasite Eve, mitochondrial Eve, shows up. We're not
Surprise.
sure how, we're not sure why, but there she is. And then you fight her, and it's very anticlimactic. It's one simple boss form, and
Mm.
yeah, it's kind of how it goes. But this game did have multiple endings based on saving NPCs.
All right. Well, they tried something
So
there.
it's got that going for it. There's like the true good ending where like everyone lives, everyone's happy. Aya and Eve are not like a sibling pair, which is weird because like it's your clone, but it's not your sibling, and you're gonna take care of her. And then Kyle's like the boyfriend now, and it's all just easy peasy. Then there's like everyone dies.
It happens.
So there's that. But this game does have its one redeeming quality, and that is one of its weapons is Squall's Gunblade from Final Fantasy VIII,
That's pretty cool.
which is the most badass thing you can imagine.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool weapon. I like that weapon a
Right.
lot.
It's pretty cool.
All right. Parasite Eve 3.
All right. So let's fast forward many, many years when Sony thought to themselves, what can we do to push PSP sales?
Oh, God. It was one of those. Oh,
And they
okay.
said, listen, Square Enix, you got this Parasite Eve series you're doing nothing with. Fans are always bitching about it. Bring it back, bring it back. But bring this shit back. Now, I'm not quite sure if there was a rights issue with the name Parasite Eve, but this game is not called Parasite Eve 3.
Okay. That might be why I have zero recollection of a third
It
game.
is
Okay.
called The Third Birthday.
Yes, I remember this. Yep.
It's not like The Third Birthday, a Parasite
I
Eve
remember.
story.
I
It's
know. I
just
remember
called
this.
The
Yeah.
Third Birthday.
Third birthday. Yeah, I remember. Yep.
Now, The Third Birthday has multiple meanings. The first of which it is the third awakening of Aya's powers. So her powers were evolving throughout both games, and now in this
Right.
third game, they reach a new evolutionary state.
Okay.
Which there was a game called Mind Jack that Square Enix also made back around the same time. I think it was about you could put your mind in different players. Like there was a monkey character with a gun, and there was like soldiers and shit. You could like jack their brains
I
and
think I
control
remember this
them.
game too.
It wasn't very well received for obvious reasons. But Aya could do this in this game. She could essentially mind jack enemies and NPCs and soldiers and like play as them in the game. Gone are any cool magic abilities. That's not gonna go away because fuck that shit. And this
She's
is
evolved past that. She
this
doesn't
is a
need those
straight
things
up
now.
third person shooter. Now
Okay.
we have
That's what us American kids want.
we
You know what I mean?
have we've gone from one of the most well written, well told, well directed sci-fi body horror experiences to a sci-fi light slash action experience in Parasite Eve 2.
Mm-hmm.
And you say to yourself, how could it get worse? Well, when you involve the Kingdom Hearts writer,
Oh boy.
what happens is you have a game with aliens and time travel.
All right, just don't even tell me about this
It,
game. It's done.
we're gonna go to a few points because I gotta
Oh
tell you
boy.
how this shit ends. I got to have it end. So it opens with a very Kill Bill scenario. It's Aya and Kyle's wedding. Woohoo! And they're gunned down.
Oh God.
They are gunned down. When Aya wakes up, she has some, I think, some light amnesia, but still, she's kind of there. And these aliens called the Twisted have invaded Earth, and they're feeding on the human population. That is when the CTI is formed, the Counter Twisted Investigation. So, just to boil all this down to like, again, its most basic points and dumbest points, somewhere along the line, Eve decided to implant her memories into people closest to Aya. That was Kyle and like three other people that were close to her.
Okay,
To
that's not terrible. So like that part,
right.
that
To
could
what
be
would evolve into what she called the high ones.
okay.
Right. So
The only
her
high ones are the people who bought this
yeah,
game.
are the ones who made it actually. So Eve, sorry, Aya eventually goes back in time to prevent all this from happening. So she goes back to her wedding day, more or less.
Yeah.
But what we find out is that this entire time, you've not been playing as Aya. You've been playing
Mm,
as her sister Eve, who mind jacked into Aya's body because Aya's body died during that shootout at the wedding.
yeah.
But Eve dove in to sort of save her. And this whole time, you're playing as a character whose clothes rip off with damage, by the way. She gets like nearly nude at some points. Is really a 4-year old girl.
Uh-huh.
So this whole thing kind of ends with with
I guess
Eve,
that's still a parasite,
right?
but okay.
Eve in Aya's body in a new timeline where the Twisted don't come, but Aya is still kind of dead. She's in her body, and Kyle's still alive, and they're a couple, but he gets that it's not really Aya in there, oddly enough.
So he's
So he may
okay.
not hit that pedophile style.
Yeah,
You don't know yet.
that's that's not
But
that's
again,
not
is it
good.
like a big scenario?
That's not good.
Not good at all. And then um it's a brand new timeline at the very end of the game. As Aya is walking, well, even Aya's body is walking down the streets of New York. But we're back in New York, by the way. We're back in New York City. Thank
Good.
God.
Bringing it
They at
home.
least got that right. A blonde woman walks past her and says, like, congrats on your fourth birthday. So again, the meaning there was Eve's third birthday, going into her fourth birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And this figure is presumed to be Aya, who is somehow still alive in this new timeline, even though Eve's in her body. But when Eve turns around, the woman's gone. So was she imagining it? Was it a cliffhanger? We don't know.
It's the part of Aya that survived, the brain,
But the
the
brunt of it
memories.
all, because to understand this story is 10 more podcast episodes. It's we
Okay.
go from a lesson plan to a college thesis.
Got it.
And I don't have time for that.
Nobody has time
I
for that.
played this game twice in my life. I played it once in Japanese because I couldn't wait for localization to come out.
You were desperate for that Parasite Eve
And
3.
then I was like, wow, like this game looks kind of cool. It's fun and I wonder what they're saying, but I'm playing it.
Yeah.
So I bought it when it came out here in the States and I was like, "Oh my god. I have played this twice and it's horrible." So, I want to end this on one final thing.
Okay.
That is my pitch to bring back and save this franchise.
that's usually what I ask you.
Right.
So, how would you? What is Parasite Eve for?
I would do this two ways. It would be a two-pronged attack, essentially.
Understood.
I think Parasite Eve, the PS1 game, it is too good to not remake from the ground up.
Okay.
If
Final
we,
Fantasy
if
VII treatment.
yes, if you look at how that game was turning out, Shadow of the Colossus, and hopefully, Demon Souls, if all rumors are accurate. I think Parasite Eve, if it goes from a PS1 game to a remade from the ground up PS5 game, would look phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you would tell that story exactly how it was.
Sure.
I would
Not in
I
three parts.
no, I would include more of the Mariko backstory just to flesh out where the game's origins were from.
Okay.
Maybe a
Yeah.
maybe a prologue chapter, um, something to that effect. But the game itself, as it stands, can be remade with the same gameplay, mind you.
Yeah. Just refine it a little
Right.
bit. Yeah.
Like do the Seven remake approach, like more modern sensibilities for the remake.
Sure.
And what I would do is once that gets a buttload of sales, because it will get a lot of sales, I would do the current Hollywood trend, and that is to ignore all the sequels.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I
Just
would do
yes.
a true part two that would follow part one. I would keep Aya in New York. Fuck Kyle and his dumb white ass. Fuck LA. Fuck time travel. Fuck this Eve clone. And just tell a story that makes sense.
What I the story that I would do is that here's where I would take it. All of these unexplained things are happening. Like all these monsters are still coming up, even though Eve is dead, right?
Mhm.
And Io, Ia,
Aya.
what's her name? Aya. Aya doesn't understand why this is still happening when Eve is dead. So she goes on a crusade
Mhm.
to find Eve because she feels that Eve is still alive because that's the only explanation for why this is happening, right?
Right.
And what I would eventually get to and the twist that I would have happen is that it's not Eve at all, but Aya is creating these monsters for herself because she needs Eve in order to feel to be a complete being
Mhm.
and make it so that she is the perfect being. But in order for her to continue to evolve, she needs the monsters in the world. So she's almost her cells are trying to create conflict for her so that she can continue to evolve. But in the process, she's killing the one she loves. She's killing off humanity because she's creating these abominations. And that could be like the final conflict. And then you could just end it. Then it could just be the end is that she has to sacrifice herself and to get these genes off of this planet and off out of this existence. She needs to not necessarily kill herself, but she needs to have the ultimate fight so that she could satisfy whatever part of Eve is still in her,
Mhm.
and then that could be your true end of the parasite
Yeah,
Eve.
or you could like essentially you could take what the non-canon ending for part one is with the True Red Eve and just build on that for like a big sequel. Like have that be like in the back pocket,
Mm,
like lurking in the
yeah.
background, and make that part two
Meanwhile,
focus. Like
cool.
there was like a heart transplant, a lung transplant, a brain transplant,
And they're in
different
every corner of
Eves.
the planet.
Yeah, just hunting them all down.
And it's called the Eve Network.
Right.
And that and you could make it Death Stranding, where you have to physically walk to Greenland to
hmm
fight the Brain Eve.
hmm
And
Oh God.
all right, take us home.
Oh, I think that's kind of it. This game
Yeah.
series has to come back at some point. There was a recent trademark filing, I think last year, that got me all wet and bothered. But, you know, that could be like some other bullshit. like it's a fucking part one on the PSN store for all we know in PS1 glory. But that's it. That's the end of Andy Explains It All. Steven, did you learn a lot today?
I did. I learned to again avoid sequels to classic games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess Metal Gear is the exception
Mm-hmm.
until 4 and 5, I guess. But I love 4. But yeah, I want to continue playing this with all this information in mind because I feel like it deserves it. But also, I kind of want to research ways to. Essentially, what I want to do is I don't want to play this in an emulator because I want to use the uh, those hardware things that will actually upres it. Or I'll look in PS4 if there's like a PS Now or whatever, or some way that I can play this in a higher definition because it's really rough to play through the emulator because it looks like crap.
So I think this could be a good segue to me explaining emulation and piracy to you because you can upscale it now with your current
Okay.
computer. No.
All right. So that is a sneak peek, ladies and gentlemen, because next week, that's right, next week, Andy Explains It All is going to be all about piracy and emulation, which Andy is apparently an expert at.
Don't spread
So
that around though.
don't tell anybody, although it's going to be out there for millions to listen to if they want
Millions.
to. Hey, listen, there's no end to how many people could download this thing. Not how many people are downloading it,
Yeah.
how many people can.
We need our own Eve network to get this shit going.
Ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe to this channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what your memories of Parasite Eve are. Let us know what you would do with a reboot and or sequel to Parasite Eve. And subscribe to this channel. Give a thumbs up. Hit the little bell. Andy, why don't you get us to the end of the thing? Just sign us
All
off here.
right. You should do all the social media plugs that we're doing right now.
Sure, yeah, yeah, do all
You
that.
can follow us and this great show on Twitter at NDS Podcast. Myself, I am at Panska. Steven is at Batchow27. And for all of our Facebook shenanigans, we're at facebook.com/groups/NDS Podcast.
That's an old one. It's
Well,
slash dual screens
you
podcast.
set it to fail.
You keep using the old doc.
I know, but we made this show after the fact, so
Yeah, don't worry about it.
as
Yes,
always, thanking our lovely and awesome contributors, Zazu Bits.
it's late. It's midnight.
Yes,
It's
Matt Murray,
we've
Dan Colonna, and Andrew Douglas, and of course Bradley Parsons, which
at
he
Train
he, he
Sound
did not make
Studio.
this show's theme song. Does it have a theme
Yes, he did.
song?
Yeah, it does. It's
Oh,
the
it
What do you mean?
does.
It's the
Oh, it does. I forgot.
Clisser explains it all thing. Yeah, no, he made it.
So it does.
Yeah.
And the awesome art by
Bradley
Andrew
Parsons at Train Sound Studio. Yes.
Douglas.
So, good dude.
Great dude.
Uh,
Great dude.
Remember to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/NDS podcast. Thank you, Colton Nestler, our producer. Thank you, all our patrons, for everything you do for us. And stay tuned for more Andy Explains It All. And then in April, we are starting our next seasonal content. Our next show, Andy Explains It All, will go on the shelf after about episode 7. And of course, we will be starting Dual Screens versus a video game debate show. So stay tuned. Thank you so much, Andy. Say your goodbye.
Goodbye. And remember that the worst foe lies within the self. Unless you're holding a copy of The Third Birthday, in which case the worst foe is in your hands.
Be
And
excellent to
burn
each
it!
other. Good night, everybody.